Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the SAWGRASS and Giotto presentation of the art of how to sublimate Wunderboard, or Wunderboard as the case may be, or to others it may just be a metal photo panel. But in any event, it is a very, very exciting product. While I was in Las Vegas, I went in an art gallery and I saw some beautiful stuff. And, you know, they're like 16 by 20, 20 by 24. They're $6,000, $7,000 a piece. And I'm looking at it saying, my gosh, there's less than 150 bucks worth of product and there's an awful lot of profit. So in any event, I think it's something that it behooves us all to take a real hard look at it. And at that, I'm going to let Jimmy go ahead.
Well, thanks, Wayne. Great to be here, and you are absolutely 100% correct. There's some really fascinating stuff being done with photo panels, and definitely in the right situation, it's an extremely high-margin product because when you look at the cost of actually producing versus what things are retailing for, I mean, that's just a tremendous spread there. So a lot that can be done, and sublimation is the way to do it. And, you know, our latest generation of sublimation inks from SAWGRASS are high def, which means we're going to get that high def imaging that you need to be able to get those kind of profits. So a lot going on there, a lot of opportunity, and we're going to take a quick look today at how you actually produce these metal photo panels. The Wunderboard, or Wunderboard, you know, however you want to go with that pronunciation, is the product that Giotto carries for doing metal photo panel prints. So let's take a look. Well, metal photo panels are top sellers for sublimation because we can get such good imaging out of them, okay? And it's not an expensive process, but just excellent returns. So when you really put together high definition images onto these types of panels, which are able to produce high definition images, you get a fantastic result. And these types of products end up in a lot of different places. Sometimes when you're thinking about metal photo panel, you're just thinking of a family picture put on a shelf somewhere. But if we start taking a look at how some of these things are used, they go way beyond that. You look at some of these larger applications like you can see in the bathroom there, where it is a photograph that has been put onto basically almost a wall-sized panel there, and it becomes an interior decoration, and someone paid a lot of money probably to an interior decorator to have that done. We see it in offices. Some very interesting use there in the kitchens, and this may not be just a kitchen in a home. This could be a kitchen in a professional environment. We see the living rooms, but even beyond those pictures, there's restaurants here where I live that have some beautiful sublimated images of the local area. I live on the coast of North Carolina, so I live in a very touristy coastal resort region, and a lot of our highlights, you know, our lighthouses and things like that, people have taken photos and sublimated them on the panels and then sold them into restaurants where they're on the walls. And I know for a fact, just like Wayne was talking, they didn't pay $30 or $40 for those. They paid in the hundreds for those. So a lot of different opportunities. In many cases, you're probably reproducing the work for someone else. But if you do have the ability to do good photography, you can do your own work, you know, and take it to a whole nother level. So those are really kind of the two paths you would go. You're reproducing it for the photographer or the artist, or you're actually creating your own products from scratch. So a lot of neat things that you can do with that. Well, the Wunderboard metal product from Giotto is available in two different finishes, a white gloss finish and a silver finish. And it's very interesting when you start looking at the white versus the silver, because with the white, obviously, that's your way of reproducing white. So if you have nice white puffy clouds, you're going to need to do it on a white surface such that you're able to reproduce the color white. But there are many cases where maybe white's not as important, but in some cases it's also more of a specialty item when we start doing the silver backgrounds. We're going to get a little bit different look in our photograph with a silver background. And what I love to see with silver is black and white images. Some of the black and whites that you put on the silver now become, of course, black and silver. but it takes on a really neat artistic twist. So having the ability to do silver as well as white is huge, okay? So keep those things in mind when you're looking at the different types of panels. Now, they reference it as clear gloss. I call it silver, okay? So that's just a little difference in the terminology, but gives you a lot of capabilities there. Now, the size range in this particular product is huge, from a 4x6 up to 48x48. And I was taking a look through the whole listing, and there's like 21 different sizes in each finish. I mean, so there's lots of possibilities for you to be able to work in the different marketplaces with all the different sizes, as well as those two different finishes. So our first step would be about creating an image. So let's take a look. If we're going to create an image, one thing that a lot of people use are the Adobe and Corel products. Now, I know Corel is really more of a logo-oriented product, but with Corel Paint, you can certainly work with photographs. Or Adobe. Adobe is quite popular because it includes Photoshop as well as Illustrator, but the Photoshop becomes a very, very intense way to be able to work with photographic images. Now, if you have a PC and you're going to do sublimation, then you're going to create your image using whichever graphics program you have, and then you're actually going to print it using the Power Driver 4 from SAWGRASS. Now, if you're a Mac user, you would create your image and then print it using our Mac profiles, which you would install into your Adobe product, and then using the standard printer driver. But the Power Driver is the one where I want to look at a little bit closer, because a lot of times people just accept the Power Driver as it is. They don't realize there are some settings that they should use, especially when we're working with photography. So let's just take a quick look at that. When you activate your image, you send it to Power Driver. Power Driver will give you the opportunity to make a few changes in there. And we should always say, what size paper, et cetera, et cetera. But the key thing here is under Substrate, and this is, I've blown up one of the screens here from Power Driver. You see there's a choice of metal and white or silver. That's the selection that we want to use when we're working with this particular product. And of course, setting it up to mirror and selecting the paper, that's important. Okay, that's one thing though that's key. Metal, white, silver. We want to get that set. Then we want to go over to this next tab, which says color, and make sure that we have it set on photo. Okay, because that's going to help get the color through the right way, because this is a color management program as well as a print manager, so you want to keep that in mind. So we select the color tab and go to select photo right here, and then the final setting that we need to take care of is on our tab labeled as driver, is under speed, set it for high quality. Okay, high quality. The advanced photo, you're certainly welcome to experiment with. I will tell you the advanced photo was designed with a specific product in mind. All it's going to do is it's going to actually slow your printer down, and it's going to lay down the ink a little bit more precisely. Now, high quality is going to get you top-notch quality, but if you want to experiment with advanced photo, that's okay, all right? But high quality is one that you generally would set when you're going to print for the photo panels. Now, if you're using Creative Studio, a lot of you do use our Creative Studio product, and Creative Studio versus using Photoshop or Corel has a selection of art templates for metal photo panels. I'm going to show you when we get to the end how you can actually set up your Creative Studio so you can see Giotto's photo panels specifically, and be able to use templates for that. Now, if you don't see the product template that you actually need for your particular photo panel, we have something called Blank Canvas, which will work for you to be able to set up, any size that you need. So you can set up custom sizes. So you set up in Creative Studio if you're using that, and then you're going to output to the Creative Studio Print and Color Manager. Now, when we look at the Creative Studio Print and Color Manager, that's why I call it CSPCM. That's easier to say. But printing with Creative Studio Print and Color Manager, it looks a little different, though similar, but a little different than the Power Driver. You have a couple of different settings here that you need to make sure you take care of. Under Substrate, set it for metal, white, and silver. Okay. On the same screen or the same tab, you will also find the speed here. And again, we want to use the high quality. So these are all under the same tab, which is called Material. Then we want you to click on the Color tab and select photographic. So you can see it looks very similar to the power driver, but it is laid out a little differently. But by making those settings, you're going to get the best quality image when you actually finally hit the print button. So make sure you do set those settings up the right way. All right, so now let's talk about the pressing process. We've printed out our transfer paper. We're ready to set up our metal photo panel. And we want to make sure, first of all, probably the most important step of all, to check and if we have a protective coating on our substrate, which means clear plastic, make sure you remove that, okay? Because sometimes it's really hard to even see that it's there. You'll find out when you try to sublimate with that on there that you forgot to get it off. One of the easy ways to get this started, if you look at it and you say, how do I start peeling that off? You could take that photo panel and touch one corner of it to your heat press just for a couple of seconds, okay, maybe 3 seconds. And the heat will then cause that plastic to start to melt right there on the corner. So then you'll be able to grab it and peel it right off. So you can use that pretty much with anything that has protective coating, that little tip. But we want to make sure we get that off, okay? Very important step. Remove it or it's going to give you a problem. Then we're going to tape the panel to the paper. Now notice that my artwork is larger, and that's key. When we're doing photo panels, we're almost always doing what we call full bleed, meaning going from edge to edge. And being that we're going edge to edge, covering it completely, we call it full bleed. But we really want to go larger than that. So you want your image to be slightly larger than your substrate so that when you print it out and lay the substrate down on it, you can see to line it up. It makes it much easier to line it up if you can actually see the edges. That ensures that you won't get a little teeny tiny white streak along the edge where maybe the artwork didn't quite cover something. So it's important that you take care of that. So you can see that bleed all the way around. You can see we got a couple little strips of heat tape on there. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When we set this up, we typically, or we do always actually with this product, we will have the metal face down when we put it on the heat press. So transfer on the bottom, metal on top, face down. Some people won't put the tape on there because they know they don't have to flip it over. You know, a lot of our other products, the substrates on the bottom face up with the paper on top. And we always put the tape because once we line everything up, we got to flip it over. We don't make sure nothing shifts. Here you don't have to flip it over. So some people don't use the tape, but I've always think that the tape is a good item to use because if you have any shifting when it's hot, you'll get ghosting. And so the tape is to ensure that there is no shifting between the metal panel and the paper while it's hot, okay? Then we're going to set up our temperature. Now this may be a surprise to you because a lot of times we get wrapped up in that 400 degrees for 1 minute, medium pressure. This particular product, the Wunderboard, uses light pressure. Now some of the other metal photo panels in the marketplace use a fairly heavy pressure. This one uses light pressure. You have two different options here. You can go 365 degrees for 140 seconds or 395 degrees for 90 seconds. And by the way, Giotto has instructions to download with the product. So when you're getting the product, get ready to do it the first time, you don't have to go find this webinar. You can actually download the instructions. We'll give you the heat press settings, okay? But you'll notice that those are quite a bit different than our everyday settings, and that's what's designed for this product. Very important thing to always look at what does the manufacturer say to do with the product so that we get it right. Once we have that done, you can see that I put the substrate over here on the heat press, face down, okay? And that's key. If you have it face up, it could actually damage the finish on the front. So do not have it face up. The Wunderboard needs to be face down. And of course, we always cover things, or I always cover things, with what we call a blowout sheet. Some people use Teflon, some people use paper. There's a couple of different products that are used. And the real purpose of a blowout sheet is to make sure that any stray gas from the sublimation process does not get on the heat platen of the heat press. Because if it gets on the platen of the heat press, it could be transferred over onto the next thing that you put under there. So we're putting the protective coating over really just to make sure we don't have the stray gas anywhere else. There's a couple other tips and tricks that Giotto will mention, and I'll mention too in just a few minutes too, about maybe covering this product with a couple of different materials to help you if you have a moisture problem. So we'll come back and address that in just a minute. And then we're going to heat press. So you can see it's a standard type of process. Key is getting those settings right and making sure it's spaced down. Now there's another interesting thing too. The recommendation here is to actually allow it to cool down before removing the paper. Normally we'd tell you, get that paper off as fast as you can. But with this particular product, it's been tested and it's found that the paper will remove once the substrate has cooled down. And the recommendation is leaving it on a cool surface for 130 seconds if possible. Let it cool down, which is nice because if you've ever actually touched metal at 365 degrees with your fingertips, you realize you don't have fingertips anymore. So it is nice to have a product where we're allowed to cool down. But yeah, the recommendation is allow it to cool down, then remove the paper. The paper will peel off. It will not affect the finish and will not affect the image. So that's another thing that's a little bit different about the Wunderboard versus some of the other metal photo panel products. And then we're done. Okay, pretty exciting. Pretty quick. Now we're ready to go collect some money. So that's the real exciting part. But overall, the whole process, pretty quick and simple. Pretty quick and simple and quite profitable when you're setting up with the right images in the right marketplace. So let's talk about some helpful hints here. And again, these things are on the instructions. When you download your instructions for your Wunderboard, you will be able to see exactly what I'm talking to you about here. One of the things that Giotto recommends is to use a Nomex felt pad on the bottom platen of the heat press. And when you use a felt pad, one of the things about a felt pad is it helps to absorb some of the pressure. When we're applying pressure onto something that's very rigid like metal, we're actually able to force it down into that felt pad, and it reduces the chance that the finish could be chipped on that particular metal. So they highly recommend the Nomex felt pad, which is available from Giotto, on the bottom of the heat press. Then they suggest putting a silicone sheet over the Nomex pad to help protect it, okay, keep it clean, that kind of stuff. They also recommend that you don't allow any part of the metal substrate to contact the heat platen, and that just, there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I mean, for one thing, metal conducts heat so well. And if you have a blowout sheet over the metal, you actually may be reducing the temperature just slightly. Not enough to affect the imaging, but just slightly. But if you have an area that's uncovered, touching directly on that heat platen, you could be conducting a lot more heat through that little area, which could affect your imaging. So a couple of different reasons for that, but basically it's recommended don't let the metal substrate contact the heat platen. Too much pressure can damage the finish. I mentioned this before, I mention again, this is a light pressure product, so be careful with that pressure. Excess moisture can cause ink blowout really on anything that you do with sublimation. So they have a couple of tips here. I said if it looks like you're getting ink blowout from moisture, and think about it, if you have moisture under a heat press at 365, 390 degrees, it's going to turn to steam. And we always see steam when we're doing sublimation. That's just the nature. We always have some moisture. But if you have excess moisture, that steam can actually cause a force that displaces some of the ink, which is a bad thing. Okay, so if you feel like you're having that issue, one of the things you can do is place the transfer paper face down, and I wouldn't put it on the platen or on the substrate. I would place it on, like a paper blowout sheet or something. Just place that transfer paper face down over something that can absorb any ink that may try to come out of it, and hover the heat platen, meaning just don't close it all the way, but maybe bring it down just a little bit for about 30 seconds. The idea is to warm the paper and maybe get rid of some of the moisture, but too much heat will heat the paper up and cause the gassing to start, and that's not what you want to have happen. Okay, you're just trying to warm the paper to hopefully displace some of the moisture that's in it. So you got to be careful with that. Too much heat, too much application of heat could be bad. Just a little bit is what you want to do. Another recommendation was to consider using a Pellon sheet or a polyester fabric over the transfer paper while pressing, because this too will help absorb the moisture. It's not that you have to, but it is, another recommendation, another tip if you're running into moisture. Some people don't have moisture issues, some do. It really depends on your environment more than anything else. So just a couple little tips maybe help you out. Again, you can download the instructions from Giotto. You'll get these same tips and tricks and everything you need to know about Sublimating Wunderboard, which turns into a great product for you as a sublimator. All right, so that is pretty much it, sort of a step-by-step look at it.